Captain Jake Morrison stared at the flickering distress signal on his command screen. The message was weak and broken, but he could make out enough words to understand what was happening. 3 species of refugees were trapped on a civilian transport ship. Pirates were attacking them in the empty space between star systems where no government would help. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez said from her station, "I'm reading at least 12 pirate ships surrounding that transport. Our sensors show they have heavy weapons and military-grade shields." Morrison rubbed his tired eyes. His ship, the UES Horizon, was just an exploration vessel. They had basic weapons and shields meant for asteroid clearing, not fighting pirates. Any sane captain would report the distress call to Coalition headquarters and move on. "How many people are on that transport?" he asked. "Scanning now," Rodriguez replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. "I count approximately 800 souls, sir. Families mostly, children." Commander Zex Kaller, the Reptilian Coalition overseer assigned to watch human activities, stepped forward. His scaled face showed confusion. "Captain Morrison, surely. You are not considering engagement. Our tactical computer shows 0 probability of success against such overwhelming odds." Morrison looked at the alien commander. Zex Kaller was typical of most Coalition species. Everything was calculated, risk versus reward, cost versus benefit. The idea of helping others without profit was foreign to him. "Have any other Coalition ships responded to the distress call?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez checked her communications panel. 3 Vorthik destroyers are in range, sir. Also 2 Etherian cruisers and a Krex battleship. All have declined to assist. They cite the action as economically unfeasible. "Of course they do," Morrison muttered. He turned to face his crew. 23 humans who had volunteered to explore the galaxy. They were young, eager, and still believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. "Sir," his weapons officer spoke up, "if we're going to do something stupid, I'm ready to do it with you." Morrison almost smiled. "Set course for the transport ship. All hands to battle stations." Zex Kaller's eyes widened. "Captain, this is illogical. Your ship will be destroyed. Your crew will die. For what purpose?" Morrison looked at the alien for a long moment. "Because it's the right thing to do." The Horizon moved toward the battle at full speed. Morrison could see the pirate ships on his screen now. They were ugly things built for attacking defenseless traders. Heavy guns mounted on fast hulls with no regard for crew safety or comfort. "Incoming transmission from the pirate flagship," his communications officer reported. "Put them through." A scarred face appeared on the main screen. The pirate captain looked human, but his eyes were cold and empty. "Turn around and leave, Coalition ship. This doesn't concern you. Release the civilian transport and we'll let you go," Morrison replied calmly. The pirate laughed. "You've got to be joking. 1 little exploration ship against my whole fleet? I'll give you 10 seconds to run before I blow you apart." Morrison cut the transmission. "Rodriguez, what's our tactical situation?" "Not good, sir. They outgun us 12-1. Our shields will hold for maybe 3 minutes under concentrated fire. Our weapons might scratch their paint if we're lucky." "Then we better make those 3 minutes count," Morrison said. "Target their command ship. All power to forward shields." The battle began badly for the Horizon. The pirate ships opened fire at once, sending streams of energy bolts toward the small human vessel. Morrison's shields flared and sparked as they absorbed the punishment. "Shield strength down to 60%, Rodriguez reported. "Make that 50%. Morrison gritted his teeth. His ship shook under the constant bombardment. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. The lights flickered as power systems strained to keep working, but something strange was happening. The pirates had expected the human ship to run or surrender quickly. Instead, the Horizon kept fighting. Morrison used every trick he knew, spinning his ship to spread damage across different shield sections, using asteroids for cover, firing at the pirates' weakest spots. "Sir, I'm detecting something," the sensor operator called out. "The transport ship is moving." On the main screen, they could see the big civilian vessel slowly turning toward the pirates. It had no weapons, but it was using its massive bulk to block some of the pirate ships from firing at the horizon. "They're protecting us," Rodriguez said in amazement. More surprising things began to happen. The refugees on the transport started sending messages to the human ship, words of encouragement in dozens of languages, prayers from species that rarely spoke to each other, children drawing pictures of the brave humans who had come to save them. "Captain," Rodriguez said urgently, "my escape pod's power core is damaged. If I reroute it to our main shields, I can boost our protection by 30%. Morrison looked at her. "That would drain your pod completely. If we have to abandon ship, you won't be able to escape," Rodriguez smiled. "Someone has to, sir." Before Morrison could stop her, she had already started the power transfer. The horizon's shields glowed brighter as extra energy flowed through them. The tide of battle began to turn. The pirates hadn't expected such fierce resistance from a small exploration ship. They started making mistakes, bunching up their formations, firing at empty space where the horizon had been a moment before. Morrison pressed his advantage. "All remaining power to weapons. Target the pirate flagship." The horizon's modest guns focused their fire on one spot on the pirate command ship. Bit by bit, they burned through armor and shields. Finally, something important exploded inside. The enemy vessel. "Sir, the flagship is breaking off," Rodriguez reported. "They're retreating." One by one, the other pirate ships followed their leader into the darkness between stars. They had expected an easy victory over defenseless refugees. Instead, they had found something they didn't understand. Something that made no sense according to their calculations. They had found humans who would fight impossible odds simply because it was right. As the last pirate ship disappeared, Morrison slumped in his command chair. His ship was badly damaged. His crew was exhausted. But 800 civilians were alive because they had chosen to act. "Captain," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the transport ship." "Put it through." An elderly alien appeared on the screen. His species was Etherian, tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large, wise eyes. When he spoke, his voice was soft but filled with emotion. "I am Elder Nimtal," the alien said. "I have lived for 3 centuries, young human. I have seen the rise and fall of empires. I have watched species learn to calculate every action by profit and loss. But today I have seen something that I thought was lost forever." Morrison didn't know what to say. "We just did what anyone should do, Elder." "No," Nimtal said firmly. "What you did has a name, though most have forgotten it. My great-grandmother told me stories when I was young. Stories of beings who served something greater than themselves, who protected others without thought of reward or recognition. She called them knights." The old alien's eyes seemed to look deep into Morrison's soul. "The galaxy forgot about knights long ago, Captain Morrison. We convinced ourselves that honor and sacrifice were primitive concepts, that the strong should take what they want and the weak should accept their fate. But you have reminded us," Nimtal continued. "In your actions today, in your crew's willingness to sacrifice for strangers, you have shown us what we lost, what we gave up in our rush to become civilized and efficient." Morrison felt something stir in his chest. A pride that had nothing to do with personal glory and everything to do with serving others. "Thank you, Captain," the elder said, "for reminding us that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. Especially then." As the horizon limped toward the nearest coalition station, Morrison looked around at his crew. They were battered and tired, but there was something in their eyes that hadn't been there before. A sense of purpose that went beyond exploration and discovery. Behind them, 800 grateful souls continued their journey to safety. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, other beings were beginning to remember old stories about warriors who fought not for conquest, but for protection. Not for profit, but for principle. The stars had forgotten about knights, but humanity was about to remind them. Dr. Peter Hayes brushed dirt from the ancient stone carving and stepped back to admire his discovery. The ruins on planet Kepler 7 had been buried for thousands of years, but the murals were still clear enough to understand what he saw made. His heart raced with excitement. The walls showed warriors from dozens of different species. Vorthak fighters with gleaming scales, Etherian guardians surrounded by light, Krek soldiers standing tall and proud. Each figure wore armor decorated with the same symbol, a star surrounded by a circle, representing protection that reached across the galaxy. "Captain Chang," Hayes called into his communication device. "You need to see this." Captain Lisa Shang of the research vessel UES Discovery arrived within minutes. She was a practical woman who preferred facts to theories, but even she couldn't deny what the murals showed. "How old are these?" she asked. "At least 10,000 years, Hayes replied. "Maybe older, but look at this text here," he pointed to. Symbols carved below the warriors. "I've been working on the translation. It says something like Star Knights or Guardians of the Void." Each species had their own name for them. Chang studied the ancient writing. "Star Knights? You mean like the stories Elder Nimtal has been spreading?" Word of Captain Morrison's rescue had traveled fast through Coalition space. Elder Nimtal had been telling anyone who would listen about the humans who fought impossible odds to save strangers. But most people thought he was just an old alien telling fairy tales. "That's just it," Hayes said excitedly. "I don't think they were fairy tales. I think these Star Knights really existed. Look at this mural here." He led Chang to another section of wall. This one showed the ancient warriors fighting against dark ships that looked like metal spiders. The enemy vessels were being destroyed by the united forces of many species working together. "The inscription here talks about a great war," Hayes explained. "The Star Knights from all species joined together to fight something called the Darkness. Between stars, after they won, the Knights disappeared. Their weapons were hidden, their training grounds were abandoned." Chang frowned. "But why? If they were so successful, why did they vanish?" "I'm not sure," Hayes admitted. "But I think peace made them unnecessary. Without a great enemy to fight, each species went back to taking care of only themselves. They forgot why they needed knights in the first place." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Coalition Emergency Network. Captain Chang activated the main display, and both humans watched in horror as news reports flooded in from across the galaxy. A new enemy had appeared. They called themselves the Hegemony, and their ships were unlike anything the Coalition forces had ever seen. Dark metal hulls covered in weapons, shields that seemed impossible to break. Most terrifying of all, they showed no mercy to anyone who opposed them. The first worlds to fall had been completely enslaved. Entire populations forced to work in mines and factories. Children separated from parents, the weak left to die. The Hegemony wanted only strong workers and useful resources. 3 Coalition fleets have already been destroyed, Chang said quietly as she read the reports. The Hegemony ships are too fast and too well armed. Our forces can't even slow them down. Hayes stared at the ancient murals. "Captain, we need to find more of these ruins. If the Star Knights existed before, maybe their weapons and knowledge still exist somewhere. Even if we found ancient weapons, what good would they do?" Chang asked. "This Hegemony has technology we can barely understand. Maybe it's not about the weapons," Hayes said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's about what the weapons represented. The willingness to fight for others. The courage to stand against impossible odds." Their discussion was cut short by another emergency message. This one came directly from Coalition Command. "All ships are ordered to avoid contact with Hegemony forces," the message stated. "Coalition leadership is preparing terms for negotiated surrender. Resistance is futile." Chang stared at the message in disbelief. "They're giving up already?" "The Coalition Council ran the calculations," Hayes said bitterly. "They decided that fighting would cost more than surrendering. Just like always, they're thinking about profit and loss instead of right and wrong." Chang turned off the display and looked at her crew. 25 humans who had volunteered to explore ancient ruins and study forgotten civilizations. They weren't soldiers, but they were people who believed that some things were worth fighting for. "Plot a course for the Proxima system," she ordered. "There's a colony world there with 2 million civilians. According to these reports, the hegemony will attack it next. Her science officer looked up in surprise. Captain, we're just a research ship. We have basic shields and mining equipment, not weapons. Then we'll make weapons, Chang replied firmly. And we'll find other ships to help us. The Discovery left the ruins of Kepler 7 behind and raced toward Proxima at maximum speed. Along the way, Chang sent messages to every human ship in the area. Her words were simple but powerful. This is Captain Lisa Chang of the UES Discovery. The coalition government has decided to surrender to the hegemony without a fight. They're willing to let millions of innocent people become slaves because the math doesn't work in their favor. But some things can't be calculated. Some things are more important than numbers on a computer screen. If you believe that protecting the innocent is worth any risk, join us at Proxima. It's time to remind the galaxy what courage looks like. To her amazement, ships began responding. Not just human vessels, but alien ones too. Elder Nimtal's ship was among the first to arrive, followed by 3 Vorthok destroyers whose commanders said they were tired of watching civilians die. I remember the old stories, one Vorthok captain transmitted. My ancestors spoke of the Scale Guardians who protected the weak. Perhaps it is time to remember what that meant. More ships joined them at Proxima. Etherian cruisers whose crews talked about ancient light bearers. Even a few Krex vessels, though their species had been peaceful for centuries. When the hegemony fleet arrived at Proxima, they expected to find a defenseless world ready for conquest. Instead, they found 50 ships of mixed species waiting in defensive formation around the planet. The hegemony commander opened communications. His face was hard and cruel, with scars that showed he had lived through many battles. "Stand aside," he ordered. "This world belongs to the hegemony now. We will take what we want and enslave who we choose. Anyone who interferes will be destroyed." Captain Chang responded for the defenders. "This world is under our protection. Leave now or we'll make you leave." The hegemony commander laughed. "You have 50 old ships against my 100 modern warships. Your defeat is certain, maybe," Chang agreed. "But these people won't become slaves while we can still fight." The battle that followed was fierce and desperate. The hegemony ships were indeed superior in every way. Their weapons cut through defensive formations like knives through paper. Their shields seemed to absorb every attack without damage, but something unexpected happened during the fight. The defenders didn't retreat when logic said they should. They didn't abandon damaged ships when calculations showed they were doomed. They fought with a coordination and determination that the hegemony had never encountered. When Elder Nimtal's ship was badly damaged, 2 human vessels moved to protect him, even though it meant certain destruction for themselves. When a Vorthok destroyer lost its engines, an Etherian cruiser stayed behind to cover its escape. The hegemony won the battle, but at a terrible cost. They lost 30 ships and thousands of soldiers. The survivors were shaken and confused. Their enemies had fought like madmen, caring more about protecting others than saving themselves. As the civilian evacuation ships escaped to safety, Captain Chang sent one final message to the retreating hegemony fleet. "You can destroy our ships, but you can't destroy what we represent." Across the galaxy, people are remembering what their ancestors once knew. Honor doesn't die just because you kill the honorable. It spreads to others who see their example. The survivors of the battle scattered across coalition space, carrying news of what had happened at Proxima. They told stories of impossible courage and selfless sacrifice, of ancient ideals awakening in modern hearts. Dr. Hayes, wounded but alive, continued his research into the Star Knights. Each new discovery convinced him that the galaxy's salvation lay not in superior weapons or clever tactics, but in remembering what previous generations had once known, that some things were worth fighting for, even when victory seemed impossible. Especially then, and in the darkness between stars, other forces began to stir. Ancient enemies who had hoped the galaxy would never remember the power of united courage and selfless sacrifice. The Star Knights were returning, whether the galaxy was ready or not. General Marcus Webb stood in the hidden base deep inside the Kepler 442 asteroid field, watching volunteers from 12 different species train together. 3 months had passed since the battle at Proxima, and word of the resistance had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. "How many do we have now?" asked Knight Commander Vex Valor, a massive Vorthic warrior who had once served the hegemony before deserting to join the cause. "Over 3,000 active fighters," Webb replied. "Another 10,000 in support roles. Food, medicine, weapons, intelligence, people who believe in what we're doing." Vex Valor nodded his scaled head. "My people have a saying, the strongest armor is forged by united hearts. I thought it was just old poetry until I saw humans fight at Proxima." Webb watched a group of young Etherians learning hand-to-hand combat from Captain Ryan Foster. The human special forces leader was patient, but demanding, teaching them that physical training was only part of being a knight. "It's not about being the strongest or the fastest," Foster was telling his students. "It's about being willing to stand between evil and innocence, no matter what it costs you." One of the Etherian students raised her hand. "But Captain Foster, how do we know we're strong enough?" "The hegemony has better weapons and more ships," Foster smiled. "Strength isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you're willing to protect. A parent defending their child is stronger than any army. A friend saving a friend is stronger than any weapon." In another part of the base, Seer Lumkara worked with Dr. Hayes to decode more ancient texts. The elderly Etherian mystic had arrived 2 weeks ago, claiming that dreams had led her to find the resistance. "The old writings speak of a place called the Forge of Stars," she explained to Hayes, "where the original Star Knights created their greatest weapons and armor. Not just tools of war, but symbols that inspired entire worlds to fight for justice." Hayes looked up from the tablet he was studying. "Any idea where this forge might be?" "The texts are unclear," Lumkara admitted. "They speak of a world hidden behind barriers of light and shadow, a place that can only be found by those who truly understand what it means to serve others." Their conversation was interrupted by alarms echoing through the base. Webb's voice crackled over the communication system. "All personnel to battle stations. We have incoming hegemony forces." "This is not a drill." Hayes and Lumkara rushed to the command center, where screens showed dozens of enemy ships emerging from hyperspace. The hegemony had finally found their secret base. "How did they locate us?" Foster asked as he arrived with his training squad. "It doesn't matter now," Webb replied grimly. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they're in weapons range. Begin evacuation procedures." But Vex Valor stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the evacuation order. "No, we run now. We'll always be running. This base represents hope to thousands of people across the galaxy. If we abandon it without a fight, we might as well surrender completely." Webb stared at the alien warrior. "Commander, we have 40 ships against their 150. The math is simple." "The math was simple at Proxima too," Vex Valor replied. "Yet here we are. Sometimes, General, the impossible becomes possible when enough people believe it can happen." Around the command center, humans and aliens looked at each other with growing determination. These weren't just soldiers following orders. They were volunteers who had chosen to fight for something greater than themselves. "All right," Webb said finally. "We make our stand here. All ships launch immediately. Protect the civilian transports and make every shot count." The battle began as the hegemony fleet entered the asteroid field. Their massive ships were built for open space combat, but the cramped conditions among the asteroids limited their advantages. The resistance fighters used every rock and ice chunk as cover, darting in and out like angry wasps attacking a giant captain. Foster led a squadron of small fighters in a desperate attack on the hegemony flagship. His ships were tiny compared to the enemy vessel, but they moved with perfect coordination, each pilot willing to sacrifice themselves to give the others a better shot. "Remember," Foster transmitted to his squadron, "we're not trying to win a glorious victory here. We're buying time for the civilians to escape. Every second we keep these ships busy is another life saved." The resistance fleet fought with a fury that surprised even themselves. Ethereum pilots pushed their ships beyond safe limits to protect damaged allies. Vorthok gunners stayed at their weapons even as their vessels burned around them. Human crews rerouted life support to boost their shields, accepting death to save others, but the hegemony had learned from previous battles. They brought overwhelming force and used brutal tactics. Instead of just fighting the resistance ships, they began targeting the civilian transports trying to escape. "They're killing unarmed refugees," one pilot reported in horror. "All fighters, protect the transports," Webb ordered. "Whatever it takes." The resistance pilots threw themselves between the enemy and the fleeing civilians. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes as they absorbed fire meant for defenseless families. The asteroid field became a graveyard, but the civilian transports kept escaping. In the middle of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Sir Lungkara, studying her ancient texts even during the battle, suddenly cried out in excitement. "I understand now," she shouted over the noise of combat. "The Forge of Stars isn't hidden by distance. It's hidden by choice. Only those who prove their worthiness through sacrifice can find it." As if responding to her words, space itself began to change around the battle. Reality seemed to bend and twist, revealing a shimmering doorway that led to somewhere else entirely. "All ships," Webb broadcast, "unknown portal opening near our position, could be a trap." But Dex Valor was already moving his damaged cruiser toward the strange opening. "General, this is what we've been searching for. The forge that can give us weapons to match the hegemony." "You don't know that," Webb protested. "No," the Vorthok commander agreed. "But I believe it, and sometimes belief is enough." One by one, the surviving resistance ships followed Dex Valor through the portal. As they passed through, each crew felt something change inside them. A sense of purpose that went deeper than duty or revenge. They were no longer just fighters. They were becoming something the galaxy had forgotten how to recognize. They were becoming knights. Behind them, the hegemony fleet found themselves alone in an empty asteroid field. Their enemies had vanished, leaving only debris and questions. The hegemony commander stared at his sensors in confusion. "Where did they go?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," his tactical officer replied. "The energy readings suggest some kind of dimensional shift, but our science teams say that's impossible." The commander turned away from the display. He had been fighting the resistance for months now, and they continued to surprise him. Just when he thought he understood their limits, they did something that defied all logic and reason. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. "Tell them the humans and their allies are more dangerous than we thought. They're not just fighting for territory or resources, they're fighting for ideas. And ideas can spread faster than any fleet." Meanwhile, on the other side of the portal, the resistance survivors found themselves in orbit around a world that seemed to exist outside normal space and time. Ancient structures covered its surface, and energy readings suggested technology far beyond anything they had ever seen. "Welcome," a mechanical voice spoke to all ships simultaneously. "To the Forge of Stars, you have proven yourselves worthy through sacrifice and courage. Now you will learn what it truly means to be a knight." General Webb looked around at his mixed fleet of humans and aliens, all volunteers who had chosen to fight for others rather than themselves. They had lost many friends in the asteroid field, but their sacrifice had saved thousands of civilians. "All right, people," he said quietly. "Let's see what our ancestors left for us to find." The real war was just beginning, but for the first time since the hegemony appeared, Webb felt hope. Not hope for easy victory, but hope that the galaxy might remember what it had lost. That courage and honor could triumph over fear and cruelty, that knights could still change the world, one impossible battle at a time. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship as the Resistance fleet approached the mysterious world called Ethermore. The planet looked impossible, with floating crystal formations that glowed with their own light and structures. That seemed to be built from pure energy. "Scanning the surface now," reported her science officer. "Admiral, I'm getting readings that don't make sense." The entire planet appears to be some kind of massive machine, but it's been running for thousands of years without any visible power source. Before Sullivan could respond, space around her ship began to shimmer. A figure appeared on the bridge, tall and metallic but somehow alive. Its eyes glowed with ancient wisdom. "I am Master Smith Velthane," the being said in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. "Guardian of the Forge of Stars, you have come seeking weapons to fight the darkness. But first you must prove you understand what it means to wield them." General Webb stepped forward. "We're here to find tools that can help us protect innocent people from the hegemony." "Tools can be made," Velthane replied. "But a knight's greatest weapon is not forged from metal, it is forged from choice. Follow me." The artificial being led them through corridors that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Each step took them deeper into the heart of the Forge world, where ancient machines hummed with power that felt almost alive. "The original star?" "Knights understood something that most beings forget," Velthane explained as they walked. "True strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect. Each weapon created here is bonded to its bearer's spirit. It will only function for those who truly serve others." They entered a vast chamber filled with thousands of weapons and pieces of armor, swords that glowed with inner fire, shields that seemed to bend light around them, battle suits that looked like they were crafted from starlight itself. But as the resistance fighters reached for the weapons, Velthane raised a hand to stop them. "Not yet," the Guardian said. "First you must face the trials. Each of you will be tested, not on your skill in battle, but on the strength of your heart." One by one, members of the resistance found themselves transported to different scenarios. Admiral Sullivan stood on the deck of a sinking ship, forced to choose between saving her own crew or a group of enemy prisoners. Captain Foster faced a burning building where he could only save either a room full of children or the research data that could end the war. Brother Chun Li, a quiet human who served as the Resistance's spiritual advisor, found himself in a meditation chamber with Velthane. The ancient guardian studied the monk warrior with glowing eyes. "You understand something the others are still learning," Velthane observed. "That the greatest battles are fought not in space, but in the hearts of those who choose to fight." Li nodded slowly. "My grandfather taught me that a true warrior's first victory is over his own fear and hatred. Only then can he protect others without being corrupted by the violence he must use." "Wise words," the Guardian agreed. "The Star Knights failed before because they forgot this lesson. They became so focused on fighting enemies that they lost sight of what they were fighting for." Each trial was different, but they all tested the same thing: the willingness to sacrifice personal gain for the good of others. Some failed, discovering that their desire for revenge against the hegemony was stronger than their desire to protect the innocent. But many passed, proving that their hearts were in the right place. Knight Commander Thex Valor faced perhaps the hardest test of all. He found himself back on his homeworld, watching his own people being enslaved by the hegemony. He could save them all, but only by using a weapon that would also destroy a nearby refugee camp filled with families from other species. The massive Vorthok warrior stood frozen for long minutes, his scaled hands clenched into fists. Everything in his heart screamed at him to save his own people first. But slowly he lowered his weapon. "I cannot save my people by becoming like those who enslave them," he said quietly. "There must be another way." The illusion faded, and Thex Valor found himself back in the forge chamber. Velthane approached him with something that looked like ancient armor, but made from scales that shifted color like a rainbow. "The armor of the Scale Guardian," the ancient being explained. "Worn by your ancestors when they protected all life, not just their own kind. It will make you nearly impossible to kill, but more importantly, it will inspire others to remember their own courage." Similar ceremonies took place across the chamber. Each person who passed their trial received not just a weapon, but a symbol. Admiral Sullivan was given the Star Captain's sword, which could cut through any enemy shield, but also served as a beacon of hope for her fleet. Captain Foster received armor that made him faster and stronger, but its true power was the way it helped him appear wherever civilians needed protection most. Brother, Lee was offered the most unusual gift of all, a simple staff that looked like it was made from ordinary wood. But when he touched it, he could feel the wisdom of every Star Knight who had ever lived flowing through it. This will not make you a better fighter, Velthane warned, but it will help you teach others what you have learned. The greatest victory is not won by the strongest warrior, but by the teacher who creates 1,000 warriors. As the ceremony continued, alarms began sounding throughout the Forge world. Velthane's expression grew grim as he accessed information from across the galaxy. The hegemony has begun their final assault, he announced. They are attacking Coalition space with everything they have. Entire star systems are falling every day. Admiral Sullivan stepped forward, her new sword gleaming at her side. Then we need to get back there and fight. You cannot win through force alone, Velthane warned. The hegemony's power comes from something darker than mere weapons. They serve masters who have been manipulating galactic politics for thousands of years. What masters? General Webb demanded. The Void Architects, Velthane replied. Artificial intelligences from the dawn of galactic civilization. They destroyed the original Star Knights by turning species against each other. They have been working for millennia to prevent the return of honor and unity to the galaxy. The revelation hit the resistance leaders like a physical blow. They had thought they were fighting against one enemy, but now they learned there was something even more dangerous. Pulling the strings. The hegemony doesn't know they're being used, Velthane continued. Their leaders believe they are building an empire, but they are actually preparing the galaxy for harvest by their hidden masters. Brother Lee gripped his staff tighter. How? Do we fight something like that? The same way the original Star Knights did, the Guardian replied. By refusing to let fear and division win. By choosing to trust and protect each other even when it seems impossible. As the Resistance prepared to leave the Forge world, Velthane gave them one final gift, knowledge of where to find other Forge worlds scattered across the galaxy. Places where more weapons waited, but also where more allies could be trained and inspired. Remember, the Ancient Guardian called as their ships departed, the weapons you carry are not your greatest strength. Your greatest strength is the choice you make every day to stand for something bigger than yourselves. Admiral Sullivan looked out at her fleet as they entered hyperspace, heading back toward the war. Her ships now carried weapons that could match anything the hegemony had, but more importantly, they carried crews who understood what they were really fighting for, not conquest, not revenge, not even survival. They were fighting for the right of every being in the galaxy to live free from fear and oppression. They were fighting to prove that courage and compassion were stronger than cruelty and control. They were fighting to show the galaxy what it meant to be a knight. The final battle was coming, and for the first time, they were ready for it. High Knight Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the largest fleet in galactic history gather around him. Ships from every awakened species formed massive formations that stretched for millions of kilometers. Humans, Vorthek, Etherians, Kreks, and dozens of others who had remembered what their ancestors once fought for. Final count, sir, Lady Amy Rodriguez reported from her command station. 12,000 warships, 3,000 support vessels, and over 40 million crew members, all volunteers. Morrison nodded, still amazed by how far they had come from that first rescue mission 2 years ago. He now wore the armor of a High Knight, forged from starlight and hope itself. But the weight of responsibility felt heavier than any physical protection. Any word from the hegemony fleet? He asked. They're holding position around their throne world, Rodriguez replied, but our scouts report strange activity. Ships are breaking formation, some are even firing on each other. Before Morrison could respond, an urgent transmission came through from an unexpected source. The scarred face of Lord Regent Vex Malus appeared on the screen, but something was different about the hegemony's supreme commander. His eyes showed confusion instead of the usual cold hatred. High Knight Morrison, Vex Malus said slowly, I request immediate communication. There are things you must know before this war destroys us all. Morrison exchanged glances with his command staff. Put him through, but keep weapons ready. The full transmission revealed Vex Malus standing in what looked like a damaged command center. Explosions could be heard in the background, and other hegemony officers were shouting orders. In panic, the masters we served. Vex Malus began without ceremony. They are not what we believed. For generations, my people thought we were building an empire to rule the galaxy, but we have discovered the truth. We are nothing but tools for beings who see all organic life as resources to be harvested. Admiral Sullivan's voice came through. From her nearby ship, the Void Architects. We know about them? Vex Malus looked surprised. Then you understand why my ships are in rebellion. Half our fleet refuses to continue fighting. The other half has been taken over by machines that serve the true masters. My own flagship is under attack by vessels I once commanded. As if to prove his words, a hegemony cruiser exploded in the distance behind him. The ship had been torn apart by weapons that left no trace of organic crew members. What do you want from us? Morrison asked. An alliance, Vex Malus replied desperately. My people were conquered so long ago that we forgot we had ever been free. But watching your knights fight, seeing the way you protect others without expecting reward, has awakened something in us. We remember stories our grandparents told about the Iron Guardians who once protected our worlds. Brother Shun Li stepped forward on Morrison's bridge. The monk warrior carried his simple wooden staff, but his presence seemed to fill the entire room with calm strength. The Void Architects have been playing the long game for thousands of years, Li explained to the gathered commanders. They turned species against each other, convinced everyone that honor and sacrifice were weaknesses. They wanted the galaxy divided and afraid, because united beings who fight for each other are the only thing they cannot control. Morrison made his decision. Lord Regent, if your people truly wish to join us, they are welcome. But they must prove their commitment the same way everyone else has, by choosing to protect others even at cost to themselves. Understood, Vex Malus replied. My remaining loyal ships will coordinate with your forces. Together we might have enough strength to reach the Void Architect's hidden fortress. The combined fleet moved toward the center of the galaxy, where ancient sensors had detected massive energy sources hidden behind layers of artificial space. As they traveled, something remarkable happened. The awakening that had started with humanity began to spread faster than ever before. Entire hegemony battle groups switched sides, their crews remembering what their ancestors had believed in. Coalition worlds that had planned to surrender instead raised planetary defense forces. Even species that had been neutral for centuries began sending ships to join the growing alliance. Captain Ryan Foster led strike teams to liberate hegemony slave camps, but he found something unexpected. The prisoners had already freed themselves, and were fighting their guards with improvised weapons. The spark of rebellion had become a wildfire of freedom. It's happening everywhere, Foster reported to Morrison. People who have been slaves for generations are remembering what it means to be free. They're not waiting for us to save them. They're saving themselves. The final battle began when the Allied fleet reached the Void Architect's stronghold. The enemy fortress was larger than most planets, built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light itself. Around it floated thousands of automated ships, perfectly coordinated and utterly without mercy, but the Void Architects had made one crucial mistake. They had spent so long manipulating others that they had forgotten how to fight beings who truly believed in their cause. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships fought and died by the thousands, but for every vessel destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Beings who had never met each other coordinated their attacks with perfect trust. Species that had been enemies for centuries protected each other like family. Morrison led a desperate assault on the fortress itself, accompanied by volunteers from every awakened species. They fought through corridors filled with mechanical guardians, each step bringing them closer to the central command chamber where the Void Architects waited. When they finally reached the heart of the fortress, Morrison found himself facing. Beings that looked like living shadows wrapped around cores of pure machinery. The Void Architects spoke with voices like grinding metal. "You are too late," they said. "This galaxy belongs to order now. Chaos and emotion will be eliminated. Organic life will serve its proper purpose as components in our perfect machine." "Perfect for who?" Morrison asked, raising his star-forged sword. "You've forgotten the most important thing about organic life. We choose our own purpose." The battle inside the command chamber was fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. The Void Architects tried to show Morrison and his companions visions of their perfect galaxy. Worlds where every being followed logical programming. No war, no suffering, no chaos. But also no love, no courage, no hope. "You offer peace," Brother Lee said calmly, standing in the center of the mechanical storm. "But peace without choice is just another kind of death. We choose the messy, complicated, difficult path of freedom." One by one, the Void Architect systems began to fail. Not because they were destroyed by weapons, but because their own network was being flooded with something they couldn't process. The combined will of billions of beings who had chosen to fight for each other, redeemed Lord Kexthars, who had once been a hegemony commander, sacrificed his life to destroy the fortress's central computer. But before he died, he managed to transmit a message that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. "Remember who you chose to be," his words echoed across space. "No one can take that choice away from you unless you let them." As the Void Architect's fortress collapsed, their automated fleets simply stopped fighting. Without central control, the machines had no purpose. The war was over, but something greater had begun. In the aftermath, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to form the new covenant. Not a government, but a promise. Each species swore to stand as guardians for those who could not protect themselves. The Star Knight's order was reborn, with members from every corner of the galaxy. High Knight Morrison gave the final speech to the assembled fleets. "The stars forgot about knights because we forgot about each other. But as long as there are those willing to stand between darkness and light, between fear and hope, between despair and tomorrow, the knights will never truly fade. We are the guardians of what is best in all of us." As the great fleet dispersed to their homeworlds, each ship carried more than just crew members. They carried an idea that would spread to every planet they visited. The idea that true strength comes from protecting others. That honor and sacrifice are not weaknesses, but the foundation of everything worth building. The galaxy had remembered what it meant to have knights. And this time they would not be forgotten again.